And hello, all newcomers, and welcome back, my fellow Aeternians. As always, it is me, Emperor AP, and today we are going to be doing our final part of the three-part series on Dracul Cycoldia relations. This has been a video that I've been wanting to do for a long time because the actual incident happened like a couple months ago. So this is a fairly old news at this point. But to give anybody who is here who doesn't know the situation a quick rundown, um, Cycoldia and its leader Christina the First, um, very notable for her appearances at MicroCon and in other micronational arenas dealing with MicroWiki, stuff like that, connected with Dracul through West Arctica. And so they ended up becoming pretty close nations pretty fast, being in close proximity with each other, and they ended up being able to develop very strong bonds. I see everybody joining in. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you for liking the video, Maki. I see you. Max, I see you as well. Oh goodness, I'm dropping everything. Thank you guys so much for joining. Maki said, nice haircut. Thank you so much, Maki. It means a lot. Um, yeah, so the idea behind talking about this, uh, when Dracul and Cycoldia became very close, um, they started to butt heads in some areas. That's covered in other videos, but the long and short of it is the different tensions that arose over multiple different incidences ultimately caused Dracul and Cycoldia to not only sever relations with each other, but also to do so in a way that is um, uh, conflicting. They ended up breaking their relations and saying basically, I don't think Dracul and Cycoldia are going to have relations again in the future. And both of their sides were kind of saying that. I think at this point things may have changed slightly. Of course, there's still no active relationship between Dracul and Cycoldia. Nothing, no trade agreements, no larger connections. But I certainly think that time has calmed things down a little bit. Uh, I will say, from Dracul's side, it seemed to me in doing these interviews, I did an interview with both President Stephen Luke of Dracul and uh, goodness, Empress Christina the First of Cycoldia, the monarch of Cycoldia, and the thing that Dracul seemed to be focused on and upset with was Christina's actions or her lack of action in certain areas with Dracul, saying that the way that she connected to Dracul as not only a monarch in her nation, but also becoming a citizen in Dracul, they felt that certain things that she did in Cycoldia, whether it would be posting articles about Dracul, talking about Dracul and her experiences there, or whether it be, information that she's sharing with other citizens as far as things that are happening. It seemed like Dracul didn't like that Cycoldia had a particular image of the Dracul that was affected not only by Christina's um, experiences there, but also just the differences in culture between Cycoldia and Dracul. Cycoldia was primarily angered with Dracul based around the issues circulating around trans rights. It As Christina herself says in her interview that we did with her, um, there a majority of the leading council in Cycoldia and the administration there is trans. So of course, trans rights and the way in which trans people are spoken about is held very nearly and dearly, in the way trans people are treated, held very nearly and dearly to Cycoldians. And so I think Christina experiencing a larger and more diverse set of political views was concerned with the way that trans rights were being talked about and trans people were being talked about in Dracul, and that kind of um, spread through just the political discourse in Dracul, where there were candidates who were um, who were in Christina's mind um, uh, presenting like concerning legislation, presenting a concerning platform for their politics in Dracul. And so in doing that, Christina essentially responds with, "Well, all of this is not appropriate from her, not only from her offices in Dracul, but in her office as the monarch of Cycoldia." And so that upsets Dracul. Dracul ends up responding to that. That happens a few times throughout their history, and then eventually it culminates in this continued um, place where we are now, where it ultimately divides Dracul and Cycoldia. I think, first off, let me go ahead and read the comments before we get too far. Roland says, hello, AP. Hello, Roland. It's good to see you. Esnia, hello. It's good to see you. If you saw my message, please hit me up. I'm curious to know about what your ideas are for connecting to the Empire of Eternia. Maki says something that I can't understand, but hello. Francisco says, hello from the Republic of Yara. Oh, good haircut. Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I did switch it up. I'm sure for some people it's alarming. I just did it last night. To get back on topic, though, we're really talking about Dracul and Cycoldia, and the largest concerns that came up in my mind were the way that the situations seemed to unfold each time. It felt like there was a little bit of a pattern to it. Um, I think it's hard to it's hard to figure out how to parse things out because I think Dracul had a certain obligation in the way that things were set up, but I feel like the overarching circumstances are a problem. So in my opinion, I think the biggest key factor to pull out of this is that someone who is a monarch of one nation should probably not, or in a government position in one nation, should probably not become a citizen of another. It's not that that can't work or can't happen, but particularly with micronationalism, where people are creating their own governments, and therefore the government is created in such a way that they have to constantly keep up with and manage it for it to survive and for their nation to continue. It's really, really hard for you to separate yourself from that national identity to be able to jump over to another micronation and do something entirely different and to have loyalty and the same kind of setup in that nation, especially if those two nations are connected. I think that happened with Dracul and Cycoldia, where Cycoldia really went all in Dracul, right? They had their monarch. They had not only these like economic ties, not only these ties that like shared territories. They had oh goodness, I'm gonna forget the name of the territory now. But they had a mutually shared territory um, that was supposed to be used for things. They were planning, larger scale events, and then all of a sudden things kind of fell apart. And I think it's it's a problem because if Cycoldia and Christina are personally invested in Dracul, not only with their economics, not only with their social policies, but their monarch literally like being a citizen of that nation and saying like we support and identify with this nation similarly to our own. Their leader had a direct, personal connection to Cycoldia and was friends with the president of Dracul, Stephen Luke. And so, among other Cycoldia, as well as other Draculians that she was friends with, the thing that is so sad about it is that it did destroy those friendships, I think, to some degree. Hopefully not fully, but um, I think when two cultures come together, it can be very, very hard uh, to see eye to eye. And when you have so much at stake in that, things may go well for a week or a month or a year, but as things get more and more rocky, if you are all in 100% with another nation, it can leave you in a dangerous position. And I think that's what happened to Cycoldia, where Christina, as the monarch of Cycoldia, became a part of Dracul, liked Dracul's culture, got excited about their events and their participation, the way that they handled themselves. And then in buying into this concept and in supporting Dracul and becoming a citizen, as well as the monarch of her own nation, the active running monarch of her own nation. She participated in Dracul politics and quickly found that some of the viewpoints in Dracul politics did not at all support or identify with who she is as a person and what she needed from a government and a society to live in. So that being the case, when you run into that, but now you're a government official in that other nation, now you are directly personally connected. You have, what is essentially like extended family in this other community that you've invested in. And you feel like it's something that you can no longer support, or it's something that, it has uh, opinions within it that you don't like. How do you back away from that? How do you change that? Especially in something that is a democracy, right? Christina, I think that's one thing that should be considered as well. Christina is going from this place where she is a monarch in her own nation. Her nation is based around the ideology that that monarchy follows. And so, in the establishment of their nation, even though they are a republic, technically, um, they have a setup that is very homogenized. They have tenets that they believe in and rules and laws that they support that has been aged enough to have everybody pretty much in direct support of those. Of course, there are dissenting opinions. Of course, there are some small arguments, but it seems that Cycoldian culture comes together when it defines particular issues, especially ones around trans rights. Again, the administration being more than 50% transgender. I think that or transitioning. I think that the biggest issue then becomes the transitioning into a democracy where she is experiencing all of these different things, but has very little ability to sway and change opinion. Where she is even in a government position, but because of how small micronational democracies are, if you are in a group, in class or at work, and there's 10 people in the group and you're one of the 10, if you're new to that group and they've been voting the same way on different issues for a significant amount of time, and they have their own kind of politics established, they have their own stuff. When you go in there and you try to ingratiate yourself as a part of that group, or try to develop your presence as a part of that group, you can find out that people may not sway to the things that you're interested in, and people may severely affect your personal beliefs, and that's horrible. That sucks. It sucks to feel like you can't go in and make change somewhere. I think I I was a little bit disappointed with how Dracul treated the situation, as far as specifically choosing not to condemn the things that Christina brought up. Christina's largest issue, the thing that ultimately broke things apart, were the statements by the Dracul Blue Party during a personal meeting. Again, Christina's interview talks about all that. So does President Luke's. The thing that really got me about it and really gripped me about learning about this whole story was just that Christina felt really hurt. She had acted and spoken out as a public official in Dracul and in Cycoldia. And so, in doing that, President Luke ultimately decided, well, we are not going to condemn the words of this other person that was in the message group, in the whatever the conversation they were having about this was, the kind of unveiling of some of the Dracul Blue Party's platform. And so, that being the case, when they started to move forward with this, and we scheduled the interview with President Luke, he said he felt like it wasn't appropriate for the president to take a position on somebody's political political platform, and that certainly can be Dracul's established ideology and its setup. But I feel like I have seen President Luke take opinions on other things that are external to Dracul, and as well, make that a part of Dracul culture and Dracul life. And so I I was surprised to see that though some things can be swayed and affected like that, the one connected to Christina and somebody who they had both considered to be good friends of each other, that he decided not to to make a change for her sake, and to say, you know what, we're not going to tolerate that in Dracul. We're not going to kind of do anything that supports transphobic or homophobic ideologies. Even though it is connected to private individuals in Dracul who are citizens who are doing their own thing, it still does like seep into public life. I will say, though, that I don't think that it should be expected that if somebody joins your micronation and you have a particular culture and a particular ideology set up, that that person should, especially in a democracy, have the ability to come in and start telling people and not even telling people, but just trying to sway opinion and make big changes very quickly. I don't think that that was Christina's direct intention, or her necessarily effectively what she did at all. She was trying to bring up um, um, the the things that hurt her and the things that caused issue with her as a Cycoldian as well as a Draculian. And so whenever this unfolded, I think Christina really hoped that as her friend and as well as a government official, that President Luke and his administration would speak out against the Dracul Blue Party. And they didn't. And so Christina, I think, felt, one, that she was, and I don't want to put words in her mouth. If you want to see what she said, please go and watch her interview on it. But from my summary, from my understanding, I believe that what she wanted was to have President Luke speak out, and to have some way of affecting change in that. I think President Luke's ultimate decision was based around a concept of trying to be neutral, trying to be bipartisan to some extent. But it is a strange topic to take that stance on, I suppose, because it is a civil rights issue, because it is talking about because it is talking about like identity, and how somebody should be treated, or what the establishment of different ideologies within your small but collective community is about. I think if I were in his shoes, I would have probably made a different decision, just because there needs to be able to incorporate some change in a society, especially when you get larger and larger. You should find specific intentional ways to pull in those new ideologies and to kind of help to implant them and support their growth, because otherwise they can get very unintentionally kind of exercised from the group. They can be ostracized, excuse me. They can be cast out. So the difficulty there is, I think this should have been a really proactive situation where Christina was able to find ways to feel that she could play an active role and speak her mind, and really get her message out there, and as well have some connection with the Dracul government to be able to point out this issue and how Christina felt, and what could be done to prevent this in the future for people who support trans rights and who want to live maybe in Dracul as a trans person. It is such a difficult topic for me to talk about. One, because I'm not trans, but two, because this is like a multi-layered issue where the the thing that is impacted hardest is that these two people who created these micronations ultimately, became friends, and then that friendship broke up because of the culture and the context that Christina came from in Cycoldia, and the culture and the context that Dracul was developed in, with President Luke and with the rest of the Dracul Blue Party and the other members in Dracul. I think that this this issue, though, is something that can be resolved in micronationalism. I think not just this issue as far as dealing with trans rights and stuff like that. Everybody has to make their own culture around particular issues and what they believe. Aeternia certainly supports trans rights and that inclusivity. But I think what's most important here is to understand that as we continue forward as micronationalists, as people who are just trying to make countries develop these communities, we really, really have to be able to understand the culture and connection that these other communities have with each other, and also we really, really need to be able to create intentional connections with people who are different than us and with people who are going to be a part of our nation. When someone becomes a part of your micronation, you should encourage them to be as informed as possible about the people in the nation, what their views are, who they are, get a lot of face time with those people, and to really, really have those things underscored. If there are problems there, I think those things should be addressed really quickly. And for certain of those aspects, I will give credit to Dracul because they absolutely did. One of the things that I was really excited about, that I heard about, was that they tried to do something that's unique that I suppose I've seen to some degree in other micronations, but not this way, where essentially they had an issue between one of the citizens of Dracul and Christina as another citizen, and they essentially like first made the offending party issue like an apology to Christina, and I thought that was really cool. But then on top of that, they eventually set up like a restraining order where they were like, hey, we want to like just limit these two people's ability to like communicate. But we do see one as like a particular offender in this case. So like Christina is going to be the petitioner, and this other person is going to be the the I guess subject of the order. So in doing that, they kind of were able to limit that a little bit. Tensions ended up flaring up anyway, which led to where we are now. But I think that there are preventative measures like that that can be more helpful, but as well, we really have to remember the concept that we of course have to find ways to make sure that other members and other citizens of micronations feel welcome and that they feel a part of things. But on top of that, I think that there should be a process for either incrementally assimilating to some degree someone into your nation and into that culture and identity, or a way of transitioning them out of that. I think that should be a process that when someone gets citizenship in your nation, they may not be able to immediately join. Most citizenships have some sort of application, some sort of questionnaire, some sort of interview process that happens to specifically define what it is that connects that person to this nation that they're wanting to join. And so I think this is a lesson that is fundamental in how we view citizenship as micronations. When we continue to develop these citizenships and we have larger and larger communities that we're building, we're connecting people from all different walks of life together, and we have to understand that those people are going to have far different opinions and are going to be very, 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 very in need of a system that can develop for them that allows them to appropriately integrate into that society. if you, for whatever reason, have issues with somebody who's a new citizen, slowly like making their way into your society and feeling more at home and feeling more comfortable, that process should have steps in it which address those issues and try to fix it, but as well are constantly analyzing throughout this process whether or not somebody is a good fit in a particular nation and how that should work, whether those problems that come up are resolvable or not. Because I think the thing that was sad about this situation with Dracul and Cycoldia was it was something that connected to them personally, which is the worst of it, but as well, it established a connection to their nations that now made all of the people in their nations more or less distant from each other, right? If you if you have a personal squabble with a friend or something like that, you shouldn't allow it to spill over into some of the things that you're trying to develop. But in this case, it was already something that was connected to all of that. It would be like if you and your friend work together and you address something at the office really inappropriately, and then your friend like doesn't want to talk to you anymore, but it's half the office where half of the office goes, oh, we're just gonna put a barrier now in between this side and that side, so that way none of my people in my department can talk to any of the people in your department. And that's rough too, because as these communities grow, think of all the different connections that could be made and all the potential benefits that could be had from their development. But these two nations now deciding to step back and away from each other, hopefully they will both experience lots of future endeavors with other nations. But the thought that it could have happened so well between these local nations to each other, these nations that seem to have a really strong bond initially, maybe if Christina had not never become a citizen and had just become a diplomat in Dracul, maybe that would have changed things. Maybe if Dracul had set up more of a more of a trial period or more of a uh, sort of guided entrance into Dracul, where Christina's interests could be looked after. She could be really, really made to feel welcome in the community, that people could be, um, not just for Christina, but for all citizens, that they could be entered and welcomed in as directly important to the contribution of the nation, and to be explained, hey, this is Christina from Cycoldia. She's going to like help us to grow all of our stuff. She's going to be one of the main connectors to this entire other country with an entire other culture that we're going to be able to now have a friendship with. And so in doing that, I think maybe some of the tensions could have been de-escalated, and I think uh, a lot of a lot of future development would be saved from that. I think it is, again, just the most important thing that I can stress here is it is absolutely tragic when things that are enjoyable for people, things that are such a big part of their life, like micronationalism, to ultimately end their friendship with others. And as well, it is absolutely imperative that as we continue to grow and as our community starts to get more and more responsible for the people that it is collectivizing and connecting to each other, that we have to be able to uh, really address what citizenship means and the entrance into a citizenship, the application into a citizenship. That should be something that we really, really start to review in a major way, because Aeternia right now just has a citizenship application. We have some kind of interview process where I like email and talk to the people. If I felt really concerned about it, I suppose I would do like a Zoom call or something, or if it were for a particularly important decision. But the biggest issue that we would run into is something that happened exactly like what happened in Dracul and Cycoldia, where both of these nations just created these really strong connections. One became a citizen of the other, and then everything fell apart. It destroyed the citizenship, it destroyed the friendship, and it destroyed the working relationship between those countries. If you put in more, a longer process of developing citizenship, that can entirely surpass, I think, a lot of these issues where if something gets brought up, it can be handled, it can be managed in a way that is not only efficient for the continued progress of both nations, but also is effective in actively listening to and developing solutions for the problems that were created. Because if someone brings a problem to you, of course, you have the ability to um, develop your own opinions on it and your own way to handle it. But I would say that there should be some method to address that should be undertaken and should be proactively undertaken. Because if it's going to be brought up by one person, it's going to be brought up by 10. It's going to be brought up by 100. As your nation gets larger and larger and larger, those initial things that you didn't account for, that you didn't try to actively change, will start to resonate with people, will start to happen again and again. They'll kind of haunt you. That's something that happens with all nations, with all businesses, with all things. If you don't clean up a thing that's, that was um, pointed out to you, hey, there's some, um, there's a problem, there's a water leak or something in your nation. If you don't fix that water leak, you may be able to work around it to some extent, but it's always going to hit you in a way that you least expect and that is the most damaging. Where all of a sudden it's, oh no, we have a massive fire, we need to put out the fire, but there's this water leak that's limited how much water we have, so now we can't put the fire out. It's always going to be something that cascades and that expands and that causes more problems than it could ever benefit by leaving it. And I think democratic micronations have a tougher time with this. And I think part of this whole issue, like I brought up a little while ago, was directly connected to the fact that it was a monarch from a monarch slash republic that connected to monarchy slash republic that connected to a straight out democratic republic. And I think it could have been forbidden, but more than that, it's something that really, really underlines that need for inspection. And it shows that democratic micronations don't always have a ton of flexibility because, because of how small micronations are. Christina, as the monarch of Cycoldia, could feel that if she had a large enough issue that needed to be addressed, her supporters would be able to rally behind that and that her government would move to support her. So it would be very unlikely that if there were something that somebody came to Christina about and said, hey, I don't feel comfortable with this, I don't think this should be the way that it is, that they wouldn't make a change for it. If they decided not to, though, it would be something that is directly placed on Christina and her government, because it would be, while there's a republic and while there's kind of a consensus to make votes, you have a ton of authority in changing that. I think for Dracul, the ability of the president is set up such that if something doesn't go through or get changed, it can be very easily connected to the president's office as the figurehead. But it's also in the ability of the president to say, well, we are a democracy, we don't really have, the president doesn't have as strong an ability to affect things, whether for moral reasons, whether it's for ensuring the state of democracy in their nation, or whether it's because of the president's actual effective power. You can kind of get away with saying, well, I couldn't, it's not my responsibility, I couldn't have done that, I couldn't have made that change. But I would say that doesn't allow for a ton of wiggle room for a lot of people. And so that being the case, micronations that are democracies can sometimes be very static, and they can be very rigid and unmoving. So the best way to prevent that is to establish in your nation ways for things to get passed through more quickly, especially as it's a very small nation. Once you get more of the kinks worked out, once you get more of the problems resolved, that come when you're at 10 citizens, 20 citizens, 50 citizens, 100 citizens, even 200 citizens, 500 citizens. That's still a relatively small number if you're planning to get into the thousands or millions. And so if you don't have a good and efficient system set up for dealing with issues as people present them, and for really defining what it is that the structure of your nation is going to be about, it can become a problem later down the line, as we see here. I think the if Dracul decides to continue the way that it is, as far as being uh, being very set to the particular way that their government is established, and the way that um, their ability to handle these like flexibility issues comes into account. I think they'll certainly continue to be very successful, but I think it could cause problems with the diversity that they're able to incorporate, and that has a lasting effect. People from different cultures, people from different societies, people from different interest groups in the same society and culture always bring to the table different ideas. They're always going to bring to the table a fresh perspective. And whether that's people who are very liberal accepting people who are conservative, people who are conservative accepting people who are very liberal, people who are from different parts of the world accepting each other, people of parts of different races, religions, whatever, accepting each other, it becomes very, very crucial to have as many different people a part of your society as possible. And while I think Dracul has the definitional plan of pursuing that, I think that some of the rigidity of their government and of their institutions may make that more difficult than with other micronations, because other micronations are smaller and have more direct, streamlined methods of approach where they can say, oh, hey, there's a big enough problem, we'll just change it. We'll just change things and manipulate things so that we can make sure that we continue to grow. But Dracul has a very streamlined plan for how they want to pursue things, it seems. And they have a very defined structure for how their government should be set up. I think in part to try and protect what it is that they view as their primary goals. But I also think it creates that rigidity that sometimes makes it harder to achieve those goals when there could be a simpler solution met. I will say I appreciate 10 viewers and 10 likes. Thank you guys so much. And if you have started watching the stream and you haven't liked, please make sure to like, because it helps to spread it out to everybody. The biggest thing that this creates for future nations and for even the continuation of Dracul and Cycoldia, in my opinion, is that we now have this precedent where we've seen a quite large public event where these two nations fell off, their ties were cut, and it was specifically because their two cultures could not mesh well enough. It makes us have to examine that. It makes us have to look into, well, why did this happen? What made this happen? How can micronations prevent this? Is there something about the nature of micronationalism or about these small groups that we're developing that ultimately can lead to this, or that may make this happen in other nations as well? It's something to be analyzed, and it's something that's important to talk about. And that's why I've been so interested in this story and talking about it. And interviewing the people involved, is because ultimately I'm here to share the story with you all and to analyze it. But I think at the heart of it, I felt that it was an issue that's really important to talk about as well, specifically because it deals with trans rights and inclusivity. I think it is so imperative that we as micronations really from the get-go set out what we want to do and streamline to approach that, very similarly to what Dracul has done. But I think that we should set in place processes to be able to ensure that these nations are able to be adaptable to the people that come into them and want to help develop them. Micronationalism is all about choice. It's all about this idea that, well, if I don't like the nation that I'm a part of, not only could I move to another macronation, but I could also become a part of a smaller community, a micronation, that is trying to develop itself into a society that I can live in and that I can work in, and that I can be happy to be a part of, that feels more connected to the life that I would like to live. When you're approaching people with that idea, and when you're telling them, I have the solution for you, I have the way to the future, I have this creation that I have established or that we have established to be able to provide a life for people like the one that we want. When people come to you with a new addition to that life or a new way of thinking about it, you should find a way to try and include them. There are going to be people who are just polar opposites. There are going to be people who just, you can't compromise your entire nation for being inclusive, because if you are inclusive of everybody and you are too open-minded, I suppose, you can lead to the point where you are accepting people of very, very staunchly different ideas. If you were 100% inclusive to that degree, you would let in like racists, and you would let in sexists, and you would let in, just people who specifically, like definitionally in their mind, have an idea of like hate or prejudice. And you don't want to do that, certainly. You don't want to say, oh, well, that's accepted, we're like hype about it. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you are open enough to be able to take in people from as many different backgrounds as possible, so long as it's not a specifically harmful or targeting thing for those different groups. As far as the people who you are trying to get in, the people who are helping each other and not trying to tear each other down. And it's hard to do that. It's hard to walk that line. It's hard to try and figure out policies and functions for your government that allow for and promote the protection of rights of your citizens and what they should expect as a baseline, while also being flexible enough to have the wherewithal to change in moments of in pivotal moments, in moments that are really important for the development of your nation. And I think that this is the issue that makes me concerned about it as a concept for democracies in general. There are plenty of ways that democracies can avoid this, but democracies by nature want to protect those rights over flexibility, which is perfectly understandable. It's an important part of what makes a lot of modern democracies and macronations so successful and so tried and tested for so many decades. But, and throughout centuries, but the problem becomes in a small scale. When you have a democracy that is made of a relatively small number of people, you have not taken a large enough section of the population of the earth, cross-section of the population of the earth, to really have a good feel for something that is inclusive to most people, to the majority of different, groups that you can absorb into yourself, and to give you fresh perspectives. Once you are the size of like the United States, things are still problematic. There's still a lot of things that were set up in the United States' primary establishment that people now today have been, incrementally over decades and decades fighting to change and to make different because of adaptations to modern times. And I think that's one of the things that makes people so frustrated with large-scale democracies, macronational democracies, is that they feel like, well, my vote doesn't count. I'm so tired of having to, try and vote and work in the system that I don't see immediate change in, and I don't feel like is representing my interests enough. So when people get frustrated with that and they look to alternative communities like micronationalism to try to develop that and to try and make whatever their dream is, if you develop it in a similar way to the thing that you felt was so difficult about the previous system, then you can run into the same difficulties. Now, that may not be the reason for Dracul's establishment. Dracul's establishment could be, very, very in line with the United States, which is perfectly fine, and many other macronations. There are multiple micronations that do that exact thing, and who are designed specifically as a promotion of just individualized culture, but not necessarily a unique, defining trait for governments. But I will say, that the difficulty with uh, developing a micronational democracy is always going to be present, I think, in the fact that you have such small groups of people who are making such large-scale decisions for what will be a future population that ideally you expect to be many times larger than the one that you started out with. That's not anything based on ideology. That's not based on any, foundational morals that you set up within your government. It has everything to do with the fact that democracies really want to preserve rights. And that in preserving rights, you have to create as much of a rigid structure as possible. But when you're starting off your government in your country with a small group of people, all of those people may agree on things to establish as the important rights and necessary things to lock in place, which may become harder and harder for people of other societies and other groups to become involved in and feel actively supportive of. It's tough. It's tough, tough, tough to do. Developing a micronation is not easy. You're going to take risks all the time, and you're going to develop things in ways that will later come back to bite you, and that you'll feel like is perfectly reasonable at one moment, and then feel like you're kicking yourself in the next moment. That's not a problem. That's human experience. That's life. But I will say that it is necessary that as we continue to go along, we try to look out for those things in each other, and we also try to really figure out a way to develop ourselves to be always learning and to be always trying to grow in that. Micronational monarchies, and macronational monarchies for that matter, have a ton of issues as well, particularly around the idea that you can get caught in almost the exact same trap. In a micronational democracy, the worry is that you don't have a large enough, diverse enough population to be able to adequately affect the things and define the things that are important to the rest of the globe. But on the other hand, if you are a monarch of a small nation, it can be even worse, because if you are so connected to one particular idea or one particular viewpoint in your personal life, you may not be able to expand yourself out to see the viewpoint of the rest of the world. That in this circumstance, I think is different because it specifically dealt with, like human rights and like identity as far as personal identity. But I will say that I have seen plenty of examples of other micronations. For example, ones dealing with particular styles of government or particular ways of ruling that tend to cause problems. A lot of people, when they become a micronationalist, feel themselves to be fairly politically experienced or very knowledgeable about the way that they want to set things up. And of course you would feel that way because you've researched it, you've looked things up, you've tried to learn about, okay, well, this is how I want to set up my government, these are the things I like in politics, these are the things I don't like in politics. You would have had to be pretty seasoned in just being exposed to politics and exposed to some of the basic ideas. But I don't think that makes you a political expert. I would say that, it becomes really difficult to see what you're going to need to develop or how your nation's going to be able to grow from the driver's seat of that. You have a particular idea and a particular mindset for what is best, and when you try to move forward, that sometimes isn't the correct answer, and you have to shift and you have to make changes in order to be able to set that up more permanently and to be able to benefit your society the most. So that is an incredibly difficult thing to do, and it's something that is a major thing to look out for in micronationalism in general. Whether you're talking about democracy, whether you're talking about monarchy, whether you're talking about an anarchist commune, whatever your setup is, you have to make sure that you are able to connect to the people that you're growing to make room for. You're literally growing your nation, you're expanding its population, and you're trying to set up place for those people to call home. Whether that's a physical place, like we are with our new land purchase and with the territory that we're establishing, or whether that is digital, like we've done with our Discord and like so many other nations have done with, MicroWiki, with, connections to Discord and to other different platforms like that, other social media. What you're doing is trying to develop what those details ultimately are going to be for the future of your civilization, potentially after you're long gone. The idea of knowing the answers to all that right away is unfathomable, even to political experts. How your society is going to change with time are constantly disproved by people who think that they can make predictions about the future, and that's not just a political science area of difficulty either. It's an entire thing into itself. People have for generations tried to predict what the next 30 years will look like or what the next 50 years will look like, and it never turns out to be exactly that. It's always off to some pretty noticeable degree. And so when we're developing our nations, we shouldn't try to keep to that prediction ideology of, oh, I know exactly what is going to be important for my nation. I know exactly how my nation's going to need to develop, and these are going to be the important characteristics of it. If we don't put in place the ability to change our minds, if we don't put in the ability to make those split-second decisions when things are changing, we will become too rigid, and it's a problem. I think as we continue forward, I am excited to see more from Dracul and Cycoldia. I know they both have their own independent projects that are developing, and I know that they will both continue to have, I'm sure, tremendous success. That being the case, I am curious to see how things continue to develop with this. From the ending of both uh, Stephen Luke's interview and Christina's interview, it seemed like they both felt that there wasn't going to be future established relations, that there wasn't going to be any continued friendship between the two of them personally, and that was disheartening to hear. But if that is the case, I think that may be kind of the grand conclusion of this story. Of course, not of the Dracul and Cycoldian stories, but of their connection to each other, their shared story. But if it is not, I will definitely be continuing to the series and talking about kind of what changes and how, as Dracul and Cycoldia develop independently, I want to know what it is that changes about them. Are they going to have different policies? Are they going to have ideological changes? Are they going to be the same? And how will that affect future relations that they have with other nations? Will Christina become the citizen of other nations, and how will that affect Cycoldia and those other nations? I think already she is a part of at least one other micronation besides her own as being a citizen of, an active contributor to. That's a lot of hats to wear. That's a hard thing to manage and to juggle for any person. But I wonder if she will have similar issues in the future, and I'm curious to see how that works out. Um, until then, I appreciate everybody hanging out with us and supporting us. I know for the longest time I haven't been able to make a fully edited video. I tried to do my best with the Christina interview because I had my audio cut out and I just didn't want to put something in that was super low quality for you guys. I wanted to at least try to make it watchable. But with everything else that we've been doing, having the land, trying to get large projects that we've had underway for months concluded, like continuing with our connection to Stamaria and sending them their care package. It it's been a lot. I've been running around. I've been trying to figure things out to continue to make sure that Aeternia is more and more stable, and to make sure that we have everything that we need to continue developing. I'm definitely going to continue to make mistakes with that. I'm definitely going to continue to have to learn from that, and that's why I was so excited to cover this topic, is because it seems like two people, two communities who are very bright, are very excited for the future, and are actively, eagerly developing, and learning from their developments and how they change can teach us all something, I think, including myself, who makes about 1 million mistakes a day. So that being the case, I appreciate you all sticking with us. I appreciate you all watching this channel and helping us to continue to move forward, because we are in a state of epic transitions. For years, we have been trying to get this land purchased. Now we bought it, spent all our money, cashed out, and so we are trying to develop a home there from that. It's not easy, as you guys have seen some of our previous live streams over the last couple days, trying to cover some of that. It's not a quick process. It's not something that's easy, but we're gonna get it, and we're continuing to push forward for that. So I appreciate everybody's thoughts. I appreciate everybody continuing to connect to our channel and to reach out to us. Aristoria said good morning. Good morning, Aristoria. Max has agreed. Onyx says, I'm making capture the flag and it has 5 minutes of animation. Good luck. Mackie says, my micronation is planning micronation chess tournament sometime. Would Aeternia be interested in participating? Sure, I would love to. Max says, ooh, very interesting. Max says, yep, I agree. AP, the United Empire has different cultures. We now have three official languages. Congratulations, Max. I'm excited to see that. Sorry, I'm trying to get this situated so that it looks nice for you guys for the last few minutes of the stream. Francisco says, I personally have history with Christina. She's not so good person, especially after she and her two friends tried to crew an alliance called the Alliance of Micronations. I'm curious to see how it works out though. Like I don't know. You're saying that she's not a good person, but that's also like with a biased opinion too. I haven't looked into that situation. I don't know what happened. So I'm just ignorant of that. You would have to tell me more, I guess. Max says it's difficult to unite different views and cultures. Robert says I agree with that, Max. It is. Robert says, hello, sorry, haven't been here lately. That's all right. Thank you so much for hanging out, Robert. We have been talking a lot about our land purchase, the development in that, and we've been talking a lot about the Dracul Cycoldia situation and how that's progressing. Veslin says, hello, Veslin. It's always good to see you. Truteau says, hello, I haven't seen you in a minute, Truteau. It's good to see you. Robert says, but I have a crazy experience to share. I was bored and my friend called me to see a micronational battle. Yeah, it wasn't that good. A micronational battle. Was it like a YouTube video that you were watching, or was it something that was like in person? Okay, here's what happened, Robert says. My friend's micronation, Julian Land, had some red riders and approached the enemy army. Since the enemy had Nerf guns, they scattered. Uh, so like pellet guns, like they had like BB guns. So Julian Land had BB guns. They brought BB guns to a Nerf bat. That's like bringing a gun to a fist fight. They escalated. They escalated really hard. I don't know why you would do that. That's rough. My friends, the Empower, chased them and took the other army through rocks, and they retreated. A few minutes later, they were surrounded with rocks and Nerf guns. Ooh, very cool. Okay, so they still somehow overturned people with almost just actual guns. Like it's not actual guns, but they're dangerous. Like they're BB guns. If you get shot in the face with a BB gun, that's a big problem. Aiden says hi. Robert says the Empower then fired at the ground and ran, not before being captured. I laughed so hard. Oh goodness, it sounds like a weird thing to like watch and experience. They used to say that people during like the Civil War would like bring blankets and stuff to watch battles on like distant hills. That's really messed up to think about that was like an entertainment form. Where people, oh, we're just gonna watch like a brutal war. And it sounds like you did like a micronational version of that. Like I imagine kids like falling down, getting shot. Ah, oh, somebody help me! And you're just like, this is funny. This is interesting. There's something so dark about that. I don't know, but I'm glad you got to have that experience. I don't think anybody in the modern day really gets that very often. So congrats, you got to see something interesting. Truteau says, I think I lean more to Dracul. However, I think they did wrong in some parts. I think parties should be allowed to say what they want as long as they don't attack people personally. I agree with that, but I think it's difficult. Difficult to parse out for this particular situation. Trudeau says, I think President Luke should have at least tried to de-escalate what happened. I definitely understand that. And I think from his perspective, he definitely feels like he did. I think there are, of course, improvements that could be made, but that's for literally anybody doing anything. I think it was just ultimately trying to make a decision about whether what was developing would be something that made or broke what Dracul's founding ideas are. And it just tested those, and they made a decision and they stuck with it. You have to give props for like sticking with your guns though. If you're gonna do something and you're gonna develop something, there's a certain extent to which you need to be able to stick to your guns. It's just figuring out when to hold them and when to fold them, so to speak, is tough. And that's what happened. FLD says, "Yo." Trudeau says the Blue Party should be able to say what they want. Luke could have condemned what happened from his party's perspective and not as president, which would solve the neutrality problem. Presidents in the US straight up as the president just talk about stuff. They just say like, yeah, that's bad. Presidents all over the world do that. As the president, you are speaking for the nation. You're speaking for your group of people, like the entire country. If you were elected, that means a majority of people, more than likely, unless your government works with an electoral college system, a majority of people more than likely have voted for that, or I guess first past the post system. If you if you taken that into account, that person is representing the entire nation, they should be able to say, hey, I think that's wrong because it affects the culture of the nation. I think that's what President Luke was trying to protect, was not influencing the nation. But I think by not doing it, you also influence the different aspects of the nation. It's just different. It's you. If you do say something, you're making a statement about it and affecting your nation. If you don't say something, you're making a statement about it and affecting your nation. So either way, I think the president's watched closely enough that you just have to do what you think is right. Max says, who let the dogs out? Because when the dogs are barking, I did. I have a switch that you can't see below the screen that I hit, and it lets the dogs out whenever I need some throwback 90s jams to start playing. But most of the time, people don't come out and start playing the music. They just ignore it. So Chirto says, the thing about micronations is that if you don't agree on a topic, you can simply leave. Absolutely. But this is a particular situation that is so important to view because it wasn't just, oh, we had a disagreement, so we left. It was, we had a disagreement, so we just took connections apart. Like we undid alliances and treaties and setups and stuff that we had in place. It was so intimately connected that the leave was a big thing. Like you could say the same thing about a relationship, right? Oh, if you're not happy with your boyfriend or girlfriend or your significant other, you can just leave. And it's like that's true, but that is a lot easier said than done. It's a complex thing. There's a lot that is taken into account, and there's a lot that affects both people's lives. So I think just saying, yeah, you can just leave the micronational thing when you're like a citizen of it, and it's like has all these trade deals with your nation. It's easier said than done. But you're right. That is one of the beneficial things about micronationalism that so many people love about it, is that you can support the ideas you believe in and do so without fear that you will be persecuted, because you are ultimately able to choose whether or not you are a citizen there. And it's easy to transition in and out of those roles until you start to really personally connect yourself. Max says 1 like, 4 views. Hey, thank you very much. We have 6 viewers and 12 likes right now. I appreciate you guys. Truto says that's why more conservative-led micronations tend to have a near complete conservative demographic, and liberal micronations tend to have a near complete liberal one. I definitely understand that. I would say it's interesting because Aeternia's demographics have like switched very weirdly. Even though I'm like a pretty liberal, like progressive guy, I think a lot of our audience, especially initially, were very conservative. There's still plenty of conservatives that are in our chats and who hang out, and that's perfectly fine. It's just interesting to see that dynamics ebb and flow, and I think micronationalism is a complex intersection of so many different views of people that you probably don't like. I don't think you have a near complete conservative or liberal view base. I think you have a lot of people who are conservative, a lot of people who are liberal, and the people in between. So I think what happens is that if you have 3 or 4 really conservative people in your micronation and there's 12 people total, if everybody else is like kind of on the fence about a lot of issues or kind of just moderates or whatever, then all of those people who are really hard conservatives will kind of tilt things just nationally, more toward a conservative viewpoint. Because if they can pull people just a little more over the fence, then you can get the votes and you can do things like that to make sure that the culture setup starts to become more and more conservative. But I think you could do that the same way with liberals. If you have, 3 or 4 very liberal people in a group that has 12 that's very, uh, uh, very in between on things, it can be the same. But the thing that I think you're talking about, which is something that is a rare case, is to see a micronation that has both a lot of very hard Democrats, Democrats, very hard conservatives and very hard liberals, because they're trying to develop their own societies based on their own viewpoints. And if you joined something that was developed in one way to an extreme or another, if it's opposite your extreme, you're not going to want to be there. You don't feel included, so you leave and you kind of filter those people out. But I think that's the problem, right? Is if you are designing your society with your viewpoint in mind, no matter what you consider yourself, no matter how bipartisan you think you can be, or how accepting you think you can be, if you don't set things in place specifically um, to help facilitate other ideologies to bloom and to blossom in your society that may not be the most popular ones right now, you can end up with a very, very skewed demographic. You can end up with a population that is very, very biased to one particular viewpoint. And that just makes it strange when dealing with other nations and other communities that may be more diverse than yours, because your community may not be able to appropriately handle all of those situations. They may not be as up to date with what is appropriate to do and how to handle those relations. I think that's a similar case to what we saw here. FLD said, very true, Truto. Good to see you, FLD. Robert says, true, sometimes micronations are just echo chambers. This fuels hostility and war. I agree with that. This is why micronations tend to cluster into blocks of all Democrats or Democratic or communist, etc. Got you. Did you see the Buckeye Revolution? They became a pharaoh a few weeks ago and do an ancient Egyptian paganism. I haven't seen that. That's a lot of information. I don't. It's about a nation I haven't heard of and a big government change. I'm curious to hear about that later. Anslavia said, talk about ELM. Hey, it's good to see you, Anslavia. Talk about ELM. What's ELM? Trudeau says, troll. Also, I'm pretty sure. I'm very confused. Did they get me on something? Did y'all make me say a thing? Trudeau says, also, I'm pretty sure Cycoldia gifted a piece of land to Dracul. What happened to that? That's what I was talking about. Yeah, Cycoldia did gift a piece of land to Dracul. They just took it back. Dracul was like, this is a great question. This is a Q&A moment for a couple more minutes. Dracul said basically that they didn't get a ton of access to it. It was in a gated community, and they had to get, Christina's connections or somebody in the community to let them in. So they ended up being, and it was a drive, so they ended up not using it very often. Cycoldia says, yeah, they didn't use it very often. There wasn't anything that was really planned to use it for, so they never really did too much with it. But when things escalated and all the tensions broke out, they just pulled it back. They just re-annexed it. They were like, here we go. It was supposed to be a joint military sort of thing, and they just took it back. Zupi says micronations can only be authoritarian when it's democratic. It becomes a mess and there's not enough people. I don't know that they can only be authoritarian. I disagree with that. But I do think that even democratic micronations, because of their size, generally have a pretty direct, like semi or authoritarian structure. Like just because you have to have a main figurehead, you have to have some kind of leader who can make split-second decisions in a group of 5 or 6 people. If 5 or 6 people are really active in developing your nation all the time, those 5 or 6 people may not be able to pick up the phone at all hours. They may not be able to do things when you need them scheduled or how you do them. So the leader is generally going to fall to most of the responsibilities. That being the case, it's important to to kind of take charge there. But that does lead to more authoritarianism, even in very diverse micronations, even in micronations of very democratic origins. Robert says exactly. Personally, a more centralized system works way better for smaller states, but in macronations than democracy. I get that. Robert says managing 5 million square miles is different than 5 acres. I completely agree, Robert. FLD says true, as I've seen authoritarian ones are the only ones that work, democratic ones work at conception, then it transforms to authoritarian. I think that can happen. FLD says, at FLD says, just like Yara. FLD says, I'm not familiar with Yara. Is that your nation or different nation? Yeah, it's Francisco's nation. Um, uh, they said they're a presidential autocracy, but 2 years ago we were Democratic Socialist Republic. Interesting. So you actually like officially changed your ideology as well. That's interesting. I know a lot of people will change kind of how they do things, how they structure things, but it's not necessarily like an official, we're changing the policy of our government sort of thing. It just naturally happens to progress into one person kind of running things. Maki says as well, socialism only works, as well, only socialism works in micronations. So basically, micronations are just communist communes. Uh, I think socialism can work in micronationalism. I think it's hard because, again, how much can you provide to people? But yeah, I do think that communism could also be a potentially viable, or socialism could be a potentially viable um, development in a nation. FLD says, you went from one extreme to another. Maki says, every micronation is communist in nature, sadly. I don't know why that's sad, but also I don't know that that's true. FLD says, very true. It goes from any ideology to a socialist, Marxist, Stalinist, Leninist, communist nation. I have seen a lot of micronations who do develop into communist nations. I've also seen a lot of micronations who develop into, authoritarian and into, social democracy. It's diverse. It just changes with time. Francisco says, before that, we were called the Union of South Africa and Namibia. I remember that. FLD says, it was also sad because socialism will never work. Oh, goodness, that's gross. Francisco says, in a simulationist apartheid state. Why? Why would you simulate civil rights issues and like near slavery conditions? What? FLD says, Francisco, you're located in Africa. Uh, Francisco says, we have colonies there, but we're located in Serbia. So why? Why did you need to make a simulationist micronation based around apartheid South Africa? That's bad. I wouldn't do that. That's horrible. Mackie says, yeah, but in a big population, even though I'm really anti-socialist, socialism works on a small scale. I don't know. I feel like if you say a socialism works on a small scale, it can work on a bigger scale. But I definitely understand, especially with all the technology that we have and are getting every day. FLD says, nice. Yeah, in small communities, but nationwide it will never work. Again, FLD, I disagree, but I understand why you feel that way. Maki says, and then posts something in Slavic. Um, Francisco says, meh, it's bad here in Serbia, very bad. I got you. I definitely understand. Um, Everybody continues to talk about different stuff. Um, Hold up. Somebody said, soon, FLD said, soon when Aeternia hits 10 years, someone needs to make an Aeternia documentary. I would really appreciate that. I really want to do that. I would love to like hit up like Vice or like someone like that, like be like, hey, please do like a really nice thing for us. I have friends who do some filmmaking stuff. I've been trying to reach out to them to see if we could do anything cool, but I don't have a ton of money to bankroll stuff, so it's not like I can like pay a crew and stuff to come out. It either have to be someone entirely unrelated who's interested in Eternia and just wants to do it and wants to come out here and film us, or it would have to be something that I intentionally set up. But if I do that, I have to pay for it. So it's tough, but I do want to get there. That's the hope. We're 5 years old right now. In 5 years, I'm sure we'll be able to get the money together to do something like that. Fake name said, Ben, what type of anarchy? Anarchist communist, anarchist capitalist, anarchist primitive, anarchist syndicate. Interesting. Maki says, FLD, you mean in 5 to 4 years? Yeah, I think that'll be fairly possible. Fake name says, I see. FLD says, Aeternia is 5 years old. In another 5 years, a lot of progress would have happened. So yeah, agreed. Benjamin says, citizenship is active consent. Um, I see what you mean. Um, Vin says, my favorite thoughts on any capitalism is not favorable to capitalism. Makes sense. Fake name says that's sad. I don't know why y'all are saying like entire ideologies are sad. Like I get it, I guess. Like if you're of the different perspective, you'd feel like it's sad, but I don't know why. Like y'all are having conversations. It's not that crazy. Ben says money is a problem. Fake says people's a problem. Ari jumped in. That's what I was waiting for. Somebody else who was here. What's up, Ari? It's good to see you. How have you been? Francisco says socialism can work. You have to do one thing, print money, and show your economy. Socialism at its best. Why? Why are y'all trolling? Um. Okay. Very cool. Francisco said, "Did you even read what I wrote? We're not racist anymore. We're conservatives." Fair. I guess that's some progress, but oh no, that's still concerned. AP says I'm good. What about you? Ari says I'm good. AP, what about you? I'm good. I appreciate it. I am gonna have to go. Yeah, I'm sorry that you jumped in right at the end of the stream. I'm sorry we're having to leave, but I do have another thing to get to. Pretty important. But I hope you guys have a good day. I appreciate seeing everybody. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me in the Empire of Eternia today and spending some time talking about this situation that was, in my opinion, very important to modern micronationalism. It shows it may not have been a world-changing event, but it was something that shows the development of two micronations that are sufficiently well known, sufficiently advanced in development, and and oh, Francisco says AP. I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to Fake Name. Okay, I got you. My apologies. But yeah, I just feel like this was a really important milestone in seeing how two larger micronations form into a collective sort of organization and connect to each other and then break apart. Seeing what caused that, it's just fascinating, and it's something that I think we can learn from. I appreciate everybody, and if you want to continue to support us, please continue watching these streams. It does help a lot. And if you want to do more with helping on our land purchase, with helping us to get some edited videos of our land purchase, and the new territory that's being established there, please help us out through Ko-Fi. We have ko-fi.com/Aeternia where you can donate. You can also get some commission stuff. We have some commissions there that you can check out that we will set up for everybody. So for one-time donations. Thank you guys again so much, and I really appreciate everybody spending time. FLD says, I gotta go. The progress in Aeternia is amazing, and I'm happy for you, AP. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, FLD, and I can't wait until next time when we can show you more and really have it develop to the point where we're living out there and working out there. Ari says, AP should name all streams Talking to Fans, Aeternia Stream 3, insert number here. Makes sense. I agree with that. That's a good bit of the stream, ultimately. But I do like to cover some topics, so I appreciate it. Francisco says, have a good day, AP. You too, Francisco. Have a good day, Ari, FLD, everybody else who's here. Fake name. I will see you all next time. Peace.